Okay, so thank you all very much. This is draft policy 2020-1, clarify holding period for resources received via 4.1.8 waitlist. Alicia Trotman and I are the shepherds for this draft policy. If you would like to go to the next slide, please. So this policy stems from a problem statement identified as a result of a recent policy experience report, where it was noted that there's ambiguity as to whether or not the 60-month restriction on transferring resources received via the waitlist applies to M&A transfers under section 8.2. The purpose of the proposal is to clarify that the restriction does not apply to this situation. Next slide, please. So you'll see, I will read the text for the record, but you'll see that the red text is the addition. Right now, it reads, address space distributed from the waitlist will not be eligible for transfer for a period of 60 months. That would be changed to address space distributed from the waitlist will not be eligible for transfer with the exception of section 8.2 transfers for a period of 60 months. Next slide, please. Volume of PPML feedback has been extremely low. We've made 2 attempts to reach out to the community and get feedback. The little bit of feedback that has been obtained has resulted in expression of concern that the proposed exception could lead to fraud. Next slide, please. So as a result of that, we're interested in discussing whether, on balance, the community believes that the creation of the proposed exception would result in a material risk of fraud or not. And that is it, except for comments on this question and any other questions you might have.
Okay, so we will reopen the queues. Thank you, Chris, for that and the discussion. So this is a draft policy.
Yes.
All the other policies that we've seen. So what we generally suggest on this is there's 2 inputs. You can also say if you're in favor or against. But what is also very useful for those new, useful to the advisory councils, even if you dislike the solution, it's useful if you can tell the AC if the problem is something that they should continue to work on, so they can continue to cycle back and try and solve that problem, perhaps with a different approach. So invite you to start using the Q&A, and I see we have a hand up already, so let's go to that hand up. Please state your name, your date of birth, and your affiliation.
Okay, Kevin, you are able to talk?
Yeah, Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. Thank you, Paul, for the happy birthday background. I appreciate it. I understand what this is trying to fix, and on the outside, that seems fine, but I do share the concern that the ability to then use section 8.2 to move stuff around all over the place could be problematic. I don't know how that can be codified in policy, and I don't know what the scenario is if somebody requests an 8.2 transfer today of space that was recently brought into them through the waitlist, etc. But this policy, while it seems very clean, seems to create more concern than it does solve.
Thank you, Kevin. Chris Tassett, do you want to go first? And I see John Kern is also appeared, so I'll let him after that.
I'm happy to just take all the input now because we've already heard that comment from others as well. So I'm interested in if anybody actually may have a way to solve this.
Okay, Chris and John, did you want to add?
Sure. So recognize we face an inherent problem here. In general, 8.2 transfers are transfers to recognize mergers, acquisitions, and reorganizations that have already occurred. And many times the parties involved, the IP address number resources are secondary to the transaction. So the community has a choice. It can allow the update of the registry in such cases, or it can not allow it because of the nature of the address block. It is true, if you allow it, there could be cases where parties are incented to do a transaction entirely to get at the address blocks. We're not, that is a real potential. Is this solvable? Well, it's as long as we do allow parties to be wholly acquired and transfer their address space, it's not a relatively easy thing to solve. So this question is a more inherent question. Do you wish to not recognize transfers that will occur anyway for these address blocks?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was just.
Uh-oh. We may
Hello?
have-
We lost you.
I believe we lost Paul. So at this point, I'm going to
I can take it.
mute. Thank you.
Okay. So we lost Paul, but we do have some more questions in the Q&A. I might as well read them while I'm here. So David Farmer, University of Minnesota, indicates support is written. While there's a risk of fraud, however, I don't see it as practical to disallow 8.2 transfers. Mercia Arnold asks a question, is there data at ARIN on the number of 8.2 transfers that have been requested before the execution of a merger? What metrics are all transfers, whether 8.2 or other means? That looks like a staff question, and I might as well answer. Oh, very good. I might as well answer since we're here. So the challenge, of course, is that we don't get a lot of data because we don't often get a request to do an 8.2 transfer before the underlying transaction has been consummated. So unfortunately, we don't have data to present. It's very rare that a party comes to us indicating that they're going to conditionally acquire the whole company or not based on what we say on simply the address blocks. Far more common is parties coming us saying they've done a transaction and they're updating their records to reflect the new legal entity. So alas, there's no data to provide to Mercer on that.
Apologies, Zoom went haywire because I had not had my headset in, as someone pointed out. So my apologies, and thank you to John for covering.
Yeah, I'm going to now step back. Paul, you have the floor, and Hollis, if you want to continue reading the Q&A.
I'll go
Q&A,
ahead and
please.
take that one. Next Q&A, Owen DeLong, Farsight Security, ARIN AC. I support the proposal as written. While there is potential for the policy to be abused, there is somewhat of a cap as that as a result of the reductions in the 4.1.8 limits enacted last year.
Okay, thank you for the feedback. And Chris, just let me know if you want to respond directly to any of them. Next comment, please.
Andrew Dull, ARIN AC, 8 Continents Network. How often has staff seen the issue so far? One option for additional text might be to include the text which states that an M&A can happen if the waitlist received numbers are part of the other significant blocks being transferred.
Did staff want to respond to that
Sure.
now or come back? Thanks.
Yeah, let me respond, Paul. So two things. Note that this is a case where past history is not an indicator of future performance. As we recently significantly changed, we put on hold the waitlist policy and then reopened the waitlist with a new policy. So past experience is probably not quite as relevant. The question that has been asked is whether or not to allow such a transfer when it's part of other list of significant blocks being transferred. And that's certainly an option. That does indicate that a company that is being acquired that doesn't have other significant blocks being transferred you would not update the registry even though they've already consummated a sale. And so this is something, if the AC wants to put in, it can, but recognize you're going to end up with the same situation we discussed. And so it's worth deep consideration.
Thank you, John, for that. We'll take our next comment.
Sorry. Yes. Laura Lang, Amerisource Bergen. There seems to be growing awareness that IP space needs to be tracked and consolidated, and not having the assurance that additional space would be requested may keep some entities from consolidating by transfer. Many times when space is acquired by the company, the space has already been used and isn't likely getting free space. It seems that it might keep some entities from updating their agreements for legacy space.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Next comment, please.
Okay. Leo Vigoda,
Vigoda.
Yeah, there you go. Apparently I'm going to trip over words today. And Polis LLC. Given a choice, I favor accurate registration data. While I see the potential downside for this proposal, good registration data is the best foundation to a registry's value.
Okay, thank you. And next comment, I think we have two more.
Yeah, Adam Thompson from Merlin. I believe that the risk is real, but ARIN's primary purpose is to keep the database up to date. That therefore overwhelms the risk of allowing these transfers.
Okay. Just before we get to our last comment, we'll keep the queues open for another 20 seconds and then we'll be closing. So please either raise your hand or signal feverishly in Q&A that you're going to put a question in. So, and then we'll take our last question. I mean, our next question.
I do not have any further questions.
Oh, sorry. I guess, did we get David's? All right. Oh, yeah, now we do.
Celeste Anderson, Pacific Wave, would there be a benefit in having a time limit before a waitlist transfer for merger and acquisition?
Chris or John want to address that or just take that as feedback?
So again, that's probably something for the advisory council to consider. Recognize that we have a time limit now in place for everything that's received from the wait list. And what 8.2, the question is, when someone comes in with a acquisition, a timer would just be a delay in updating the registry. The challenge here is that you have to recognize whether you're trying to shape behavior or whether you're trying to maintain an accurate registry. Not updating doesn't necessarily do anything to shape behavior. If that's something that folks are trying to work on here, they need to look at the fact that anyone can create a new entity, get on the wait list, qualify for a block, and then be acquired. And until you decide what part of that path you want to break, it's only really a question of whether we're updating the registry or not changing that path.
Okay. We'll go to our next question. Just a reminder, though, those that are, there have been some who've been indicating support or not in the chat. The chat is just a little side chat that is not part of the record. So please make sure to use QA or raise your hand. We've closed the mics, queues off. Old terminology dies hard. So let us clear our last two questions, please.
Question from Andrew Haydenfeld. Allo Communications support as written, although I share the fraud concern. Question, do other RARs have a similar policy?
Okay. I'm going to just make a slight exception because apparently there is somebody having technical difficulty. Ron De Silva, individual affiliation, supports AC work on this. He's apparently having problems either raising his hand or putting Q&A in. So
He's driving.
We don't recommend policing and driving, just as a general concern.
It's called ARIN on the road.
With that, we'll end our discussion. I thank Chris Tassett for the presentation.
Thank you.
We are going to do a poll, if I am correct on this. Now, as this is a draft policy, not a recommended draft policy, the question we ask revolves less around the text and more around the problem statement. And we just was, is this a problem that the AC should continue to work on? So I'd ask all of those to please either use the poll in front of you or respond in the Q&A that you have. If for some reason you can't do either of those, please raise your hand and we will call on you. Can we unmute Chris so he can indicate which way he wished? He's unable to. Go ahead, Chris.
Chris?
Okay. Thank you.
Hey. Wrong.
No,
Chris.
sorry, Chris Woodfield. Chris Woodfield. I apologize, Chris Tassett.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Chris, are you in favor or against?
So I actually wanted to point out that the poll question that I'm seeing right now does not ask if the AC should continue to work on this. The question I'm seeing in the poll is, on balance, does the community believe that the creation of the proposed exception would result in a mere material risk of fraud? So were there two questions to be posed in this one?
So thank you for pointing that out, Chris. So that is a good point of order. Please, everyone, just hang on 1 second. Tina Morris, could you unmute and clarify what question? Is that the question that the AC would specifically like asked, or is I may have missed the memo, so I'm apologize.
I just,
Go ahead, Tina.
there we go.
Okay, sorry, I had to unmute myself. I believe that is the correct question that was requested by the shepherd of this policy.
So is that the only question, just to be clear?
Yes.
Okay, so I apologize all the community. I get a little things of which ones there are polls, and generally we have a very standard question for each, and I clear that. So could we clear this poll out and start again then? Because obviously that's a different question.
Yes.
Okay, so I apologize to everyone. Could we please put the poll back up when it's cleared out?
Launching.
So the question is, on balance, does the community believe that the creation of the proposed exception would result in a material risk of fraud? Either are you yes or no? Please either use the poll, Q&A, or as was done, please raise your hand.
There's no open question showing in the Q&A.
So Chris Tassett, you cannot because of your mode. So please use the chat to.
Oh yeah, right. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, let's close off the poll and take a second to tally the results.
At the close of the poll, there were 99 attendees, 17 voted yes, and 30 voted no.
Okay, this input will be provided to the AC. Thank you, Chris Tassett, for your presentation. You can stop video at your leisure, and we'll turn it over to Alyssa Moore for the next policy proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Alyssa, when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for control of the, there we go.